sounds like you're awake. So, if you don't know me already, my name is Michael Glazier. I grew up in Gardner. I graduated from Gardner Area High School 4 years ago now, and I'm about to become a senior at Messiah College in Pennsylvania. I'm studying youth ministry, and I'm the youth intern here this summer. So, there's your little summary of who I am. So, today what we're going to be talking about is what it looks like to live a life where we walk alongside Jesus instead of living a life where we simply are walking alone. So I'll say that again. What we want to think about today is what does it look like to live a life where we're walking alongside Jesus instead of just walking alone. So if you have a Bible, I'd love for you to open up with me to Matthew 5, starting in verse 43. And we're going to be reading to verse 48. So again, it's Matthew 5, verse 43. And we're going to verse 48. And it goes like this. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and he sends rain on the just and on the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what reward have you? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brethren only, what do you do more than others? Do not even the tax collectors do so? Therefore, you shall be perfect, just as your Father in heaven is perfect. So to go alongside that, I have a story to read. It's actually from right down the road from where my college is. Because in Pennsylvania, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, there are a lot of Amish people. And anywhere you go just about that isn't the center of a metropolitan area, and even sometimes there are these little people in black outfits and these little carriages. And most of the time, the only thing that tourists know about them is that they don't like their photo taken, and they don't drive cars, usually. So I'm hoping to give you a little taste of what the Amish life is actually like. So the story goes like this. It's been a week for quiet reflection in the Amish communities around Nickel Mines, PA, which 1 year ago experienced tragedy. It was in the tiny community that a man stormed into a one-room schoolhouse and shot 10 young girls, killing 5. He then killed himself. And that old school has since been demolished, and the new school was closed on the 1-year anniversary, and families met privately in prayer. Since the tragedy, people around the world have been inspired by the way the Amish expressed forgiveness toward the killer and his family. But while their act of forgivenesses were inspiring, they also caused a misperception that the Amish had quickly gotten over the tragedy. Charles Roberts, who was the killer, wasn't Amish, but Amish families knew him as the milk truck driver who delivered. Last month, it was announced that the Amish community had donated money to the killer's widow and her 3 young children. It was one more gesture of forgiveness, gestures that began soon after the shooting. Donald Craybill is a sociologist at nearby Elizabethtown College and co-author of a book named Amish Grace, How Forgiveness Transcends Tragedy. He says, I think the most powerful demonstration of the depth of Amish forgiveness was when the members of the Amish community went to the killer's burial service at the cemetery. Several families went the day after burying their own daughters. And when they went, they hugged the widow and other members of the killer's family. And he continues to say, because the Amish can express that forgiveness, and because they hold no grudges, they are better able to concentrate on the work of their own healing. So as we think about this Amish family today, I want you to think about how that radical forgiveness ties into the life that we live, walking alongside Jesus, and not just walking the path by ourselves. And I want you to think of this. When we follow not just a path that we're walking on, but when we walk with the one that we know is called the way, we also get to experience the one that we know is also called the life. And that life includes love and joy and peace. But think about that for a second. Love and joy and peace. Do we really think that these families that had just witnessed 10 young people be inflicted by a shooter, 5 of them dying and having to be buried, do you think they were experiencing love and joy and peace?
No.
They certainly weren't receiving it, but they gave it. You see, they went to the killer's burial and they showed love by going and hugging these families. They gave them a taste of that peace that only God can give in such horrible circumstances. And they gave them a little taste of the joy that they were foreseeing happening, not because they were experiencing joy in the moment, but because they know that we serve a God that heals, and that someday they'd be able to experience joy again. So, what I'd like you to do now is we're going to turn to Matthew 7, and we're going to go to verse 13 and read to verse 14. So again, Matthew 7, starting in verse 13 and going to verse 14. Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, but there are many who go in by it. Because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. So I have a question. How many people here have ever got lost? And what they do is look around and say, where is everyone else going? Can you raise your hands? You got lost and you say, oh, everyone else is going that way, that's probably where I want to go. Well, when I was in high school, I had a French teacher. And she said, you know, you're in high school, you have no money. But someday, when you get out of this town, you might go to France. And what I want you to know is that there's an amazing tourist spot called the Louvre. And what you want to do is not follow the crowd of tourists that are entering through the front, because you'll sit in line for 3, 4, maybe 5 hours. But what very few people know is that if you're a native, there's a secret entrance in the back. And if you go in through the back, it's like a 5-minute wait. And what you'll do is you'll walk in through the gift shop where all of the tourists are exiting, and you'll get to enter right in to the Louvre. So I want you to think about that. Now, if you knew that and you were in France, would you go up to the line and tell everybody that there's an entrance in the back? No, probably not, because you want to get in. You don't want to wait 5 hours. But the beauty of it is the Christian life, while it is like that, while there is a better way, it's not a way where we have to wait in line. And in fact, there was a gentleman that said something beautiful, that the narrow path is something that we often think of as something that's like way away on the edge of the earth in comparison to where the wide path is. But in fact, he said that's totally the opposite of how we should think about it. In fact, what we should think of is the narrow path that we're meant to walk on is smack dab in the middle of the broad path. It's just going the other way. And as we're walking on this narrow path, walking through the crowds of people going the opposite direction, inevitably we're going to be bumping shoulders with people. And what we want to do when we're bumping shoulders with these people is tell them, follow me. So I want you to turn to the person next to you and say, follow me. Okay, that was really weak. Let's try it again. Turn to the person next to you and say, follow me. Okay, now turn to the person to the other side and say, follow me. Awesome. Okay, we're going to continue in We're going to continue in Matthew chapter 7, and we're going to start in verse 24 and read to verse 29. It's not fun to get bumped into, I know. Okay, so, Matthew chapter 7, verse 24. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rains descended, and the floods came, and the wind blew and beat on that house. and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. But everyone who hears these sayings of mine and does them, and does not do them, will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. And so it was when Jesus had ended these sayings that the people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not one of the scribes. Amen. So, with this, I have a little illustration to show you. I was at Messiah, and we were doing a Bible study, and we were talking about this, and somebody brought up the point that this is like a test. And being at college, what do you think of immediately when you think of tests? You think of literal, you sit down, you get a piece of paper, you take a test. So what they said is, if you get a good teacher, what ends up happening is that teacher is not the one that mandates the tests, right? You need to mandate the tests because the state tells you that you need to record the progression of the student's learning in order to tell if they can receive a degree. So it's not the teacher that's putting them through the test, it's the state. The teacher's job instead isn't to test the student, it's to prepare the student for the test and to be a comfort for them while they're going through it. And in the same way, God isn't the one that killed those poor Amish girls. He's not the one that incited that man to pick up a gun and shoot all of them. Instead, God is the one that was preparing those Amish families for something that they could never imagine. And he is the one that continues to be with them while they're still to this day, no doubt, wrestling with the deaths of their children. So in that same way that God is a good teacher that prepares us, we as the student have an obligation to accept that preparation. Because as every parent knows here, if your child doesn't study, then it doesn't matter how good a job the teacher does. So, what we talked about is it's like this. This is the man who builds his house on the sand, who hears the teacher's instructions, but says, I think I can do it without your instruction. And this is the man who sets up his house on the rock, who listens to the teacher and accepts the teaching. So when the winds come, the man on the sand falls. But when the winds come for this man, the man stands. So even though the teacher isn't the one that sets up the text, the teacher is the one that prepares us for it. And in the same way, you all have a candle today, and if you don't, there are candles in the back. What I'd like us to do as a church is to reflect on how it is that we've been living. Have we been living like the Amish, who have set up their lives in such a way where they have listened to what Jesus was teaching, where they have prepared themselves to forgive, no matter what that looks like, where they have prepared themselves to love their enemies, not just when a sibling steals their meal, not just when somebody ties their shoes together if they have laces. I don't know if Amish have laces. But when the worst situation comes, and the winds blow, and the rain falls, is our house going to stand like theirs did? So what I'd like to do now is to enter into a time of prayer, and we're just going to sit and reflect for a minute on, is there anyone in our life that God has prepared us to forgive, but we haven't taken the initiative to follow through and to build our house on the rock in that situation? And I'd like you, if you have a writing utensil, to write that name down and to hold the candle while you're writing this name down, to remind us that we don't want to be the man that builds his house on the sand, but we honestly want to be the man that is willing to be like this light and to shine and to walk in the opposite direction, bumping shoulders with people, leading the way to show people where the man that is known as the life is. So let's lead into prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Don't be shy, y'all can chip it. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the power, and the glory, and the kingdom, forever and ever. Amen. Let's remember this week that God can lead a horse to water, just like a teacher can give all of their students the abilities to pass the test. But we have to be the ones that drink. So go ahead and turn to the person next to you one last time and say, take a drink. Go ahead and turn to the person to the other side and say, take a drink. Let's go forth and be the church, walking in the other direction, bumping shoulders with people that are beside us, and telling them to follow us. Go in peace.